Welcome into another All Access as we are able to have all kinds of conversations on this program. We've talked with athletes, we've talked with general managers today. I believe it's our first commissioner that we're having join us. That would be Sherika A. Montgomery of the Big South Conference, getting ready for year number 3 in terms of the academic athletic year coming up. Thank you, Madam Commissioner, for joining us from your office in Charlotte, a conference that has had some exciting moments from the time you took over. I know you're getting ready for another exciting year, and you were a student athlete. We'll get more into that in a little bit. Do you have the same kind of excitement when you have another school year coming upon you like you did back in your playing days?
Absolutely. You feel the excitement. We talk about that around here all the time. You know that the summer is coming down to an end as you even feel our student athletes are coming back to campus. The fall sports are kicking off. So we do feel that level of excitement, camaraderie as well here in the conference office.
So your journey in college athletics is really interesting, but let's go back to growing up not far from where Elvis was born, right? You're from the Tupelo, Mississippi area. And what was it like growing up and I guess playing high school basketball? You're a fine basketball player, but kind of take me back through some of the things that got you going athletically early on. Was it always basketball, or were there some other sports involved?
Yes. Well, first and foremost, as you indicated, I am born and raised. I'm from Tupelo, Mississippi. Basketball was probably my main sport growing up. I did a little bit of track and field and some of the field events, but basketball very early on became my focus. And I said this recently, is no hyperbole to say that an orange basketball truly changed the trajectory of my life as well as my professional career. And so it was something that I always gravitated toward, and more than anything, the team camaraderie. And today I look back on it, it's the things that you gain outside of the wins and losses, the transferable skill sets, and that's something I'm truly grateful for.
So you ended up first college stop in a city that I and my family love because we try out all the different barbecue places every time we visit Memphis. And for folks who may not understand, there where you're from in Tupelo, it's not a far drive at all. And northern Mississippi, you almost feel like you're an extension of Memphis. But you went to the University of Memphis. That would have been in the first decade of this century. What were some of the experiences you had playing ball with the Memphis Tigers?
Of course. As you indicated, had an opportunity to start at the University of Memphis, and it was my introduction not only to college basketball, but obviously higher education. Had a phenomenal experience. I remember having about 2 weeks or so before I had to report, and of course, all the nerves and the excitement and just, everything that comes with being able to transfer and take that next step. And that's what's so special about college athletics is it provides that pathway to higher education while still being able to compete at the Division I level. So really exciting opportunity, and one that I'm still to this day tremendously grateful for, and the time that we had both on the court, off the court, as well as in the classroom, being a phenomenal institution as well at the University of Memphis.
So as a center, you played there. Then you decided to transfer, and I think it's interesting, and you may get a chuckle when you look back in your bio and some of the younger student athletes of today tell them that, back when we transferred, we had to sit out a year. You don't have to do that anymore. So you transferred to what would eventually become a Big South school, but in 07-08, Gardner-Webb was still in the A-Sun, I do believe. It was, or maybe they were in the Big South. No, they were in the A-Sun at that point. But you ended up there, and you played a final season there. And so there you moved from that Mississippi, Southwest Tennessee, Memphis area. Suddenly you're in Boiling Springs, North Carolina, not far from Charlotte. What was the whole transition like to finish up your college career?
Yeah, and I always think about that time because it was such a pivotal that point when I transferred. I tell student athletes all the time that was the point in my student athlete career that really implored me to understand my student athlete experience off the court, out of the classrooms, but what is this NCAA? What is this massive organization? And that's where I really learned what governance and compliance and what the rules and the regulations really meant. And it was because, to your point, at that point, I had to sit out as a transfer student athlete, whereas you fast forward today, it's a different day. But it was one that had a level of familiarity. Gardner-Webb University had recruited me out of high school. I played for a phenomenal coach, Coach Rick Reeves, that prior to him coming to Gardner-Webb University, he was at the University of Southern Miss. So there was a level of familiarity, very familiar with him. And I remember when I opened up my recruiting process, I remember he was one of the first calls that I made and said, wherever you are in the country, if you'll have me, I'm there.
Wow.
And I think that just speaks to the coach, the person that he was, and even to this day, tremendously grateful for that opportunity, not only to compete and finish my career at Gardner-Webb University, but just to have been a part of a coach and a leader that has impacted my life, both on and off the basketball.
Had he come up from Hattiesburg when he was at Southern Miss to recruit you in the Tupelo area, and that's where the relationship was, or had you gone to camps down there, or
Yeah,
what was the
yeah.
connection?
Yeah, so I had been to camp. My recruiting process was really in a circle to where I was being recruited both by the University of Memphis as well as Southern Miss and Gardner Webb. But the reason why it was a circle is Coach Reeves had ultimately transitioned to Gardner Webb, so he
Yep.
picked up his recruitment there and
Sure.
continued to recruit me. The
Yeah.
coach, the late great Joy Lee McNellis, who recently passed, she was at the University of Memphis, transferred back to her alma mater at the University of Southern Miss, and so she continued to recruit me at Southern Miss. And then the coach coming on board at the University of Memphis, I was also fortunate to continue my recruitment there, and ultimately that's where I ended up going. But even in that one, overview of those three schools, three coaches that even throughout the throughout the recruitment process had a tremendous impact on me.
So after basketball is done, at that point had the seed been planted to get into athletic administration? And I know your journey included a very successful run before arriving at the Big South at the Missouri Valley Conference. But kind of take me through your administrative journey that landed you where you are now.
Of course. I stepped off a basketball court directly into a conference office, specifically here at the Big South Conference office. During that year that we spoke about earlier, that I had to sit out when I transferred, I had coach, I had administrators. They really were phenomenal in making sure I stayed engaged. Obviously, I wasn't playing, I was continuing to practice, support my team, be a good teammate, but that was also my introduction to the Student Athlete Advisory Committee. And it was an opportunity for me to learn, grow, and really start what today is my vocation, but it started as avocation for the student athlete experience. And so I was very fortunate to be a part of the Student Athlete Advisory Committee. I was informed, I was educated, and that really opened my eyes to career opportunities within intercollegiate athletics. Stepped directly off a basketball court into the conference office where my background was in compliance and governance, and ended up having an opportunity to come on board full time after that internship year. And I was there for 7 years, the last 3 as assistant commissioner for governance and compliance. Had a stint out on campus at Winthrop University, which is obviously a Big South member institution,
Yep.
as associate athletic director for student success. Had a stint in South Dakota. I
Wow.
moved and served,
Huh.
yes, served the Summit League in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, phenomenal group of institutions in a great part of the country. I was there for a little under a year prior to going to the national office at the NCAA, was where I was an assistant director of enforcement investigation processing for about 2.5 years there as well. And so
Yeah.
that was a phenomenal experience. Shortly thereafter, and as you indicated, most recently, I was at the Missouri Valley Conference where I served as deputy commissioner there. And that was an opportunity that really, I think, set me up for having an opportunity to come back most recently as commissioner of the Big South Conference.
So you went from nice warm weather in the South to really, really cold weather in South Dakota, then in Indy for that matter, but and St. Louis,
Yeah.
Missouri Valley. But anyway, so you were able to come back to good weather as well. Uh, the challenges of now, and you've been able to now in a couple of years, I think probably that first year was just kind of reevaluating the league you would come back to. But the challenges of being a commissioner now at this level in this day and age of college athletics, front, and then some of the missions that you're trying to take on to get the best process going for your schools and your league.
Of course, coming back into your point, it really was an opportunity to reacquaint myself with a conference that, of course, I was familiar with, but more than anything, making sure that I was coming in and positioning the Big South Conference to continue the success that we had had for nearly 40 years. To your point, we have probably, as an industry, experienced the most transformation, change, evolution in the last 3 to 5 years than we've seen ever. And so that's really been our focus as administrators, making making sure that we not only continue to provide those holistic student athlete experiences, but making sure we're continuing to put our universities in the best positions possible to succeed, both athletically, academically, as well as in their communities. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about that here shortly, but from house settlement to new NCAA governance structures, obviously great progression that we've recently seen on Capitol Hill. It's definitely been no shortage of things going on within intercollegiate athletics here recently.
The Capitol Hill point was one that I definitely wanted to dig into because I've heard other conference commissioners talk about their discussions they've had with those on Capitol Hill. And of course, we hear in the political realm all the time, well, Congress has to do something. I believe the president's appointed a commission to look into the quote, I think, was how college football got all messed up. But the point being, I've heard Wild West probably more than I'd care to hear, but there are some matters that needed to be addressed in terms of caring for the student athletes, but at the same time, there has to be uniformity and there has to be, I guess, some sensibility. So what are some of the things that, first off, Washington can do to help your leagues at the Power Four level and the other mid-major leagues?
Of course, I think that's something that as an industry we've all been unified on, is that the need to change, the need for evolution. And we've seen that in a myriad of different ways, specifically with the recently approved House settlement that provides new opportunities for student athletes that have not been available previously. Here in the Big South Conference, we do have member institutions that are opting in and being able to provide those benefits. And we see that as a positive. We see that as additional opportunities for our student athletes. Beyond that, when it comes to what I'll call the big three from a Capitol Hill perspective, student athletes not being employees. That is something that is tremendously important, and thinking about the impact that would have would be a negative one on the Big South Conference, as well as other conferences similar positioned to us. Also, from a name, image, and likeness perspective, you alluded to it as the Wild Wild West. I think currently there are about 34 to 35 NIL laws on the books across different states. And so just thinking about the impact that has on a student athlete. If you're being recruited in the state of North Carolina, you have one set of rules versus Virginia. And so definitely having a level of uniformity for our student athletes. And then lastly, preemption. From state law, we spoke about that, but then also some limited liability protections. It's important as association for us to have the ability to make, set, and enforce rules that will allow us to continue to provide the experiences that we all know go well beyond student athletes playing experiences. And so from a Big South Conference standpoint, we've been very fortunate to engage with congressmen and women, both in our respective communities, as well as I had an opportunity to testify late June, which was an honor, in being able to represent and tell the story of the Big South Conference and how these initiatives are so important, but more importantly, how they actually impact institutions of our sizes.
When we come back, we'll continue our discussion with the Big South Commissioner, Sherika A. Montgomery. I want to talk even more about how the Big South fits in today's NCAA landscape. A very unique, to say the least, football alliance the league is involved in, coming up on a third year, and also exciting things happening around her conference as we continue in a moment. Welcome back. We're visiting with the Big South Commissioner, Sherika A. Montgomery. The testimony before Congress and Capitol Hill, you said that was in June. And again, you mentioned, how do you service student athletes for all their needs? And also the compensation piece has become a reality going back to 2021. And I think whether you're on the athletic side, the academic side, the administrative side, you can understand with the way college athletics are set up, with all the television, all the revenue, it all does make sense in this day and age. You mentioned the employee piece, and how do we keep them as student athletes? How do you make it fair for all involved? I would think maybe some questions were asked by the congressional members, but do you see a pathway? Do you kind of see some of the avenues that eventually we can reach a conclusion that gets the athletes defined as they need to be, the student athletes, as opposed to being employees?
Of course. And, there's been, as I indicated earlier, such great progression. I think as recent as last week, July 24th, there was an executive order issued by President Donald Trump. It was titled Saving College Athletics. Very similar, albeit not the same, to the SPORT Act, which we'll talk about here previously. But I think that's probably one of the biggest takeaways when I've had an opportunity to engage with individuals on Capitol Hill. everyone agrees that we have to do something to make sure college athletics continues to be preserved for generations to come. I think it's important to make sure we're protecting our Olympic sports. We want to make sure that that's not something that has a negative impact our women's sports across the board. And so being able to ensure that we have that level of attention given to intercollegiate athletics, that's something that we've seen as a positive. Also, from a SPORT Act, it's the first comprehensive bipartisan legislative bill that passed out of both the House Energy and Commerce as well as the Education Workforce Committee. And the SPORT Act stands for Student Compensation and Opportunity Through Rights and Endorsement Acts. So while we're not to the finish line, there's been great progression that has been made with both of those, both the executive order as well as the bipartisan legislation that's continuing to make its way through Congress.
And I think a key point you mentioned earlier about the fact that you have all these different state laws. There's going to have to be some uniformity, some type of agreement. And you speak from an experience that we touched on in the first segment. So many kids are transferring these days, and they don't have to sit out a year. But it's what I've thought about a lot is the academic transcripts and how you keep track, because at the end of the day, it is about getting a degree, because no matter how much college athletics change, the realities of playing and making a lot of money as an athlete beyond college, it's still a very small percentage. I would think that that's something that your university presidents are discussing with you all the time, and a league office is doing their best to maybe advise student athletes about the academic piece of this whole thing.
I think that's the most important piece. You know, we talked about the big three ask, and you hear limited liability protections. That's one area of example. Being able to set, make, and enforce eligibility rules. Currently, our academic standards, they are still in place. So whereas student athletes, they do have the freedom of movement to be able to transfer and be eligible immediately, but that's something that doesn't reach the headlines, is they must be academically eligible in terms of progress towards degree and making sure that they're on track to seek and obtain a degree to be eligible. That piece is still there. Why it's so important to make sure when we're speaking with our student athletes, should there be an opportunity for them to move on to another institution, making sure they're informed and they're educated on what this transition and the impact it may have on their academics. That's important, and that's still very much front and center.
Let's shift gears before, just really around the time you were arriving, before we were all talking so much about NIL and rev share as a primary issue in college athletics. Conference realignment, of course, hit earlier this decade, late last decade, and we all know the ramifications from the Power Four, which used to be the Power Five, on down through the mid-major conferences. And you arrived at a situation, really it had all kind of happened, I guess, before you got there, but the Big South was left with two football playing schools. I thought the league did a great job previously to put together a very good football league. So I thought it was very industrious that your conference in the Ohio Valley, which had also seen some members move on, put together an alliance. Kind of quickly touch on how that alliance works and the benefits for your football schools that play the scholarship FCS full scholarship football, Gardner-Webb and Charleston Southern, but how it all works and how it's been going from that standpoint.
Of course. To your point, we are entering year 3 of the Ohio Valley Big South Conference Football Association, and two words come to mind: innovative and intentional. Those were the two things coming in, and me having an opportunity to really be passed the baton, if you will, for this opportunity, working with the commissioner of the Ohio Valley Conference, Commissioner Beth DeBush. It was an opportunity for us to come together and solidify our commitment to FCS football and to ensure that our student athletes in both conferences had a pathway to continue to achieve continue to compete at the highest level. And so this has been our 3rd year. We actually currently have an agreement that takes us out to 2030. We currently have a total of 9 teams, which is a really good size from a football standpoint overall. And this alliance has been one that the level of competitiveness continues to rise. This past year, we saw multi-teams being able to reach the FCS championship. And most recently, we just had our football media day. And just once again, we were able to engage with your student athletes and see the opportunities that they're having. It's a reminder of why this alliance is so important, and our presidential leadership, they're so committed to this. And it's been one that we've seen really work out and be a positive opportunity for both conferences.
You, having been out in Missouri Valley country, may have been the only one in these parts that had heard of Lindenwood, right outside of St. Louis,
Yeah,
before they they got part of the Ohio Valley and in the Alliance, but I think it's been pretty cool. I thought it was cool last year because over in our neck of the woods, we keep an eye on Gardner-Webb and a little bit on Charleston Southern. But, you know, a UT Martin playing Charleston Southern is kind of a neat deal. And some of the other schools, I would think the opportunity for a Gardner-Webb and a Charleston Southern to kind of broaden their horizons has been neat. I don't know if you've had any conversations with the folks at those schools, but it has presented some interesting matchups.
It has, and we talk about that a lot as we're entering into year 3, the rivalries and continuing for our communities to get to know who's a part of the association, who's coming to town. We continue to see more of those rivalries created. I'm sure we'll talk about this in a little bit, but we have our rivalry between Charleston Southern and Gardner-Webb University with the Barbecue Bowl. But to your point, some of our Eastern institutions such as UT Martin, Tennessee Tech, Tennessee State, these have become huge rivalries that we see, whether it's hosting at a Gardner-Webb institution or Charleston Southern or Tennessee Tech. You see our fans beginning to travel and see these as rivalries. And Lindenwood, another great example of being able to recently make the transition. They have also been a phenomenal asset to the Alliance as well.
So you alluded to the fact that Charleston Southern and Gardner-Webb, as the full scholarship FCS teams playing football from the league, came up with the Barbecue Bowl, one of the great trophies, I think. And
yes.
the way I understand it, and in a Big South Fall Sports preview show we're doing on our CW channel in mid-August, folks will see a feature on that. But the way it works is, I guess, the team that loses has to go to the other campus and serve barbecue, essentially. Is that kind of the outline of that's what's riding on the game as well as getting the trophy?
That is correct. We recently had a president's call where we were speaking, and when I think about this past year, I'm almost certain President Faulkner from Charleston Southern University will be coordinating and will be joining the Gardner-Webb football team and serving them barbecue based on their recent victory. So you're exactly right, and it's a level of camaraderie, obviously being able to have individuals out, and it continues to grow. Year after year, you see some of the local eateries, restaurants get involved, but President Faulkner, he will be serving the Gardner-Webb Bulldogs barbecue in the coming weeks.
And does the commissioner get invited to this dinner?
Yes, the commissioner is invited.
Yes,
we spoke about that previously. We want to make sure I'm a part of that because I am here to serve both.
Yes, and to be served in this case some good barbecue by the team that loses the barbecue bowls and be there so that the winning team can enjoy it. You know, in the Carolinas, we've got the vinegar base down east in North Carolina and South Carolina. We have vinegar. I mean, honestly, I've lived in the state a long time. We've got both the tomato base, the mustard base, the vinegar base. But I mean, I guess, is it a variety of barbecue that's supposed to be there? Is there maybe some burnt ends or some brisket as well with the pork? I mean, how does it all work? Do you know?
Yeah, so from my understanding, I think it's going to be a local, and I don't want to say the wrong restaurant, but there's a local barbecue venue restaurant in both of the locations. And so obviously Gardner-Webb being the winner and growing up in Bowling Springs, I'm familiar with one of the big barbecue places there. There will be a spread. They'll have all the sauces as you spoke about, vinegar based versus not. And really more than anything, a camaraderie aspect for our student athletes.
Yeah. And again, a great trophy. We're showing that, the barbecue pig. And Charleston Southern is pretty cool because they also do a trophy with their arch rival in the Low Country, the Citadel. So I think it's really neat. They get to go for a couple of trophies. They get to play in an alliance that has them seeing teams from another part of the Southeast in most cases. So that's really cool. Let's wrap up our time by talking about some of the exciting things going on in your league. And just a couple of headlines. A year ago, you had a men's soccer team knock off the #1 team in the land, Pittsburgh. As High Point went and did that, and they didn't even win the league championship, giving you an idea to the depth of the league. You've got a volleyball team at High Point that's been dominant. You've got a great story at in a lot of ways going into the fall, but then also in baseball, the run they had this year. But it's got to be exciting, and I know that you look at across the board of all the different sports and have got to be impressed with this league that you're operating.
Absolutely immensely impressed. And that's one of the things we talk about in our conference office as we serve our membership, we serve our student athlete. What's one thing we're doing different to elevate the student athlete experience? Our teams, our programs, our coaches, our student athletes, they continue to do that with their level of excellence, not only on their respective playing surfaces, but also in the classroom. This year, we had a record high, nearly 80% of all of our student athletes had a 3.0 or higher. But going back to your point about the success we've had on the field, across the board, we continue to see elevation. Our men's basketball finishing ranked number 17 out of 31 conferences. To your point, our men's soccer, multiple teams having high level of success, not only during the regular season, but Gardner-Webb being able to knock off Oregon State. High Point continues to be a powerhouse in volleyball, softball. We've had such great success in multiple programs there, most recently USC Upstate, and the same in baseball. And so that's something that always excites us, is how our student athletes just continue to elevate the brand, elevate their excellence, and we try to match them with that as it relates to the experience that we're providing from a Big South Conference standpoint.
Well, Commissioner, so good to talk to you, and an example of some of the great experience they're having. We were just talking with the USC Upstate coach. They won a title after coming close in his first 2 years there, and he brought a group in, a bunch of freshmen a few years ago, and all but a couple of them are now there as seniors. So it actually, in this day and age, can happen where student athletes stay at the same place, enjoy the experience, stay on time for their degree. I know you're proud of that. But thank you so much. I think it's going to be a great year. We were kind of fall sports heavy here, but I know you're excited for all that's going to be going on in the league. Continued success for you as you get ready for year number 3.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Sherika A. Montgomery, a former college basketball player who went the administration pathway to commissioner of the Big South Conference. So good to chat with her, and we will see you next time right here on All Access.